Perfect. Perfect. Perfect.
What's going on, YouTube? It's your boy RB, and this is Philly Take with RB. Now, if you are a Philadelphia 76ers fan out there, and you enjoy talking basketball, and you miss watching this team play games, I'm going to need you to go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. And if you're new to the channel, and you want to stay updated on some great Philly content, well, go ahead and hit that subscribe. So in the last day or two, I'm doing my digging around, just trying to stay in tune with some kind of Sixers content. You know, on the channel here, we've already talked about a potential trade for Devin Booker or Buddy Hield. Go and check those videos out. Let me know what you think. Today, we got an even more interesting one, man, and that is Chris Paul. Yes, that is right. According to CBS Sports, the Sixers could potentially be interested in CP3 this summer, you know, after the season ends, whenever it does end. And, you know, I went back and I've been thinking about this one, honestly, for the last day now. And I am torn. I am kind of, you know, coming up with ways for how this could work or how this could be a disaster. And if you are watching right now, I want you to go comment down below. You know, should the Sixers pursue CP3? We can look at this one from a variety of angles. So, first off, CP3, he's 34 years old. He's been with the Pelicans. He's been with the Rockets. And he's been with the Clippers. And he's now on the OKC Thunder. Chris Paul is a veteran in this league, well-respected, a dude who I hope at least can get a ring one day because, honestly, he has been a true professional and he deserves it. CP3 is a dude that will come onto a team and run an offense. He's a dude that will step in day one and he will be ready to rock. Now, we know what happened with the Houston Rockets a couple years ago. They went to that Game 7, had an awful shooting performance, you know, from three-point range, and they lost in Game 7 to the Warriors. Honestly, everyone believes they should have won that game if they had just shot a little bit better, right? And that team dissolved from there. They were done. Chris Paul, the Rockets signed him to a terrible contract, 4 years, $160 million. He's making upwards of $40 million a year. So they sent him off to OKC, which is now where he is at. This is his first year with the Thunder in his second year of that deal. And surprisingly, to everyone's shock, even though CP3 was asking out of OKC in the beginning of the year and nobody wanted to take on that contract, he has played well. The Thunder have played well. Before this quarantine, they were sitting at 5th in the Western Conference, and nobody expected them to be anywhere close to there. They had traded Paul George to the Clippers in the offseason, got 4 first-round picks. They were ready to rebuild. And somehow, some way, Chris Paul has rallied those young guys together, him and Steven Adams, and they are in a good position. So, Chris Paul. Would Chris Paul be a good fit to the Sixers? Now, you can look at this as Chris Paul would come and bring that veteran experience. He would run this offense. He would be your point guard, your number one. Even though we play in positionless basketball nowadays, Chris Paul would be that dude on this offense. I think it would help. I think Chris Paul could come in and kind of lead these guys because, you know, sometimes they just look lost. We don't have that dude who really understands the game fully. You know what I mean? Like Ben Simmons is developing. Ben Simmons runs the point, but at times it's like he gets out of his own element. Sometimes he doesn't look like he wants to be there. Sometimes it doesn't look like he has enough assistance. So Chris Paul could step in and be that dude. But honestly, the biggest question is like, what do you want to do with your team? You know, like what is the direction of the Sixers going forward? Because say we bring Chris Paul in, right? So we'll have Chris Paul, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid. But in terms of Tobias and Al Horford, this is my personal opinion. I feel like if Chris Paul were to come to the Sixers, we would have to part with not only Tobias Harris or not only Al Horford, but we would have to get rid of both of them. And here's why. CP3 is a dominant ball handler, right? If you bring Chris Paul to the Sixers, we're going to have too many guys who are primary ball handlers. We are going to have too many dudes who need it in their hands. And it's just not going to work out, in my opinion. Like, what are we going to do? Obviously, Ben Simmons will probably move to the power forward. I mean, that's how we would look at it technically. But what would Ben Simmons do? Would he, get the rock sometimes? Would he be more of like a backdoor cut kind of dude? Would Tobias Harris end up being a spot-up shooter? Like, really, what would the direction of this team be? I think it all depends on the system that we would be implementing here. Tobias Harris, I just don't see us being able to keep him with Ben Simmons, with Chris Paul. Like Al Horford, I understand if he goes. They've been talking about Al Horford. He would make the most sense because the OKC Thunder would be more likely to take on a dude like Al Horford and his terrible contract because he played under Billy Donovan at Florida. Billy Donovan is the OKC coach, and Al Horford played with him in college, so maybe they would be understanding to that. With Chris Paul, would we take his contract? Would it be a straight swap for Al Horford? Would it be a straight swap for a guy like Tobias Harris? Who knows? I mean, in my opinion, I don't think that would be the case, even though some seem to think it would be that way. Then again, like I said, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, in my opinion, if we look at how Chris Paul played with the Clippers, if we look at how he played with the Rockets, there is a certain type of offense that you need for Chris Paul. One, you need a big man that can move. You need a big man that's going to be involved in a lot of pick and rolls. We saw Houston play a lot of ISO ball, and eventually that led to their doom, even though they kind of implemented something that was hard to stop. The ISO with James Harden, they had all three-point shooters around them. And they had Clint Capella, who, if Chris Paul wanted to do a pick and roll, Clint would be right there and he would roll to the basket. And he was, in a way, kind of a good finisher. Like, CP3 is used to playing with big men that are athletic finishers. Go back to his Clipper days. He always had a Blake Griffin or a DeAndre Jordan who was ready to roll. And Chris Paul can get his own bucket. Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted. But he is such a good facilitator. He really is. And kind of some of the characteristics I see in him, I see in Ben Simmons as well. Even though Chris Paul is way too short. And that's another thing. Like, we have this kind of perspective here. It's, we're trying to run a whole bunch of big men. We're trying to have great defense here. Chris Paul would be a little detriment to that. Don't get me wrong. He's an aggressive defender. He plays hard. But he's just a little bit undersized. But it depends. Like I said, it all goes back to whether you want to shape this team in a different way. Like in Houston, they had shooters. With LA, they had JJ Redick. Like they literally had JJ Redick. I think the most idealistic situation would be to have Ben Simmons and Joe, bring Chris Paul, and then bring some shooters, like some sharp shooters like a Buddy Hield, as we talked about in the other video. But it would also be interesting to see how they would operate the pick and roll. Because Joel Embiid, unlike the other centers that Chris Paul has played with, I'm not going to say Joel Embiid is, like slow or sluggish, even though he kind of is. Joel Embiid is just more heavy on his feet. Like, he doesn't really get up. He doesn't go up for those crazy lobs and those oops, So, like, how would that work out? Would Chris Paul be able to play, really well with Joel Embiid on the floor? Because Chris Paul is looking to attack. Would Chris Paul, maybe we run Ben Simmons in the pick and roll sometimes. Maybe Ben Simmons is on the receiving end. He sets a good pick and he rolls and goes up for an athletic finish. Because we've seen that he can do that as well. So I think there's a lot of things you could do, but what I'm most worried about is him stinting the growth of Ben Simmons and the development. Because if Ben doesn't develop that jump shot, like maybe he comes back and he still doesn't have it ready to go, then what happens with Ben Simmons? They're going to argue over who gets more touches. Like right now with how Ben Simmons is shaped out, he needs the ball in his hands because it's really all he can do on offense. He doesn't have that knockdown J yet. And we kind of saw the same thing in Houston with James Harden. Like, honestly, I think the ultimate result there was like James Harden wanted the ball in his hands all the time and Chris Paul wanted the touches. So that we know that relationship ended up going to the dust. But overall, I think you can look at this as a positive thing, but you can also look at this could potentially be a disaster. Like, let's look back on the contract situation again. So Chris Paul is scheduled to make close to $40 million over the next 2 years. He's 34 years old. Al Horford is 32, and we've seen what 1 year to the next has done for him. I mean, it would just be a Philly thing to go and get Chris Paul and, pay him this money, and then he turns out to, start being slow and, just looking like he's getting that old age to him. I feel like overall, Tobias would be the easier one to move in terms of his contract because Tobias is scheduled to make around $36 to $37 million over the next 5 years, or over the next 4 years after this year. Chris Paul is scheduled to make about $40 million. Now, Al Horford's, like I said, is only going to make about $27 million, so we would have to add more in there. I'm not really sure what would happen. Maybe it'd be a second round pick swap. Maybe we would have to include a guy like a Josh Richardson. Like, I really don't know. Maybe we would have to throw in a couple guys, and maybe OKC could even throw us in a package. I mean, I kind of am all right with a dude like a Gallinari. He's averaging like 20 points a game. He's having a decent season as well. Like I said, the OKC they're playing well. You know, maybe we go for a dude like a Dennis Schroeder off the bench who can put it on the floor and knock down some shots. He's been asking his way out of OKC for a while. Maybe we go for a younger dude with a smaller contract like a Terrence Ferguson. He hasn't shot the ball well, but he's an athletic finisher. He's a defender, a dude who could really keep up with the tempo, of the Sixers. I don't know. I honestly, in a way as well, lean towards maybe a 3-team trade. Like, I feel like someone else would have to be incorporated in on this, whether they swap a player to OKC, we get Chris Paul, or, we send Al Horford to OKC. I'm not really sure, but I do know that Al Horford and Billy Donovan go back a ways, and I feel like he would be maybe the piece to help those young guys out as they develop, as they draft, because, they're kind of guard heavy. I'm not sure what the future holds for like Steven Adams and stuff, but looking at the contract situation, Tobias, Al, and Chris Paul are all in a terrible contract situation. And one more, even an extensive look at this. And I've said for a while, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are untouchable. What if we were to move Joel Embiid? What if we brought Chris Paul in here, had Ben Simmons, and we surrounded these guys with a whole bunch of shooters? Just something to look at. I don't think it would happen. I don't want it to happen. Just another way to look at these things. So overall, I think given Chris Paul's age at 34, given the contract he is owed, even though he's had kind of an overcoming in some sorts this season because people thought he was near the end of his career, thought he was, spiraling downward a little bit. He's shown that he can still play, and he would be a great veteran leadership presence in the locker room. He would come in and run this offense, which is an element that we need to see the guys on this team do, which they don't do enough. And I think Chris Paul would come in and he would provide a lot of flow to the system. I think he would be a good pickup in that way. But as I said, I think a lot of things would have to happen in turn for it to be the right situation. So I'm not sure if this is really a quality move for the Sixers, especially looking into the future, because this is the time that we need to be ready to win. And this would be definitely a significant change. But it's a good topic to talk about. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts down below. Should the Sixers go out and pursue a guy like Chris Paul III? Is CP3 a good fit? Let me know all your thoughts down below. I appreciate you guys for stopping by. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.
Perfect.